I've been noticing something lately. It's not a thought, exactly. It's more of a feeling, a physical sensation. It's this deep, internal stillness, but not the peaceful kind. It's the stillness of a car engine that won't turn over. There's this low hum of energy in my limbs, this desire to move, to go, to start, but something is holding me in place. It's a weight in the center of my gut, a kind of gravitational pull back to the familiar, the safe, the stuck. It feels like I'm standing at a doorway with one foot raised, but I've been standing there for years and my leg is starting to ache from holding the pose. And I have a feeling you've noticed it too. It's a strange contradiction, isn't it? To feel this constant pressure to achieve, to become, to move forward, and at the same time, to feel this profound inertia. We're surrounded by stories of progress, by highlight reels of milestones. First jobs, first apartments, first houses. And if your story doesn't match that timeline, a quiet shame can start to creep in at the edges of your day. It's the feeling you get on a Sunday night, when the week ahead feels exactly like the week before. And you can't shake the sense that you're just trading water. This feeling that real life is happening somewhere else, to other people, and you're just watching from behind a thick pane of glass. It's a quiet, personal feeling, but I've started to wonder just how personal it really is. Because the more I talk to people, the more I realize this feeling of being frozen, of being in a state of suspended animation, is far more common than any of us are letting on. There's this phrase that keeps coming to mind to describe it: stuck in the waiting room. You know the feeling of a real waiting room, right? The air is stale and recycled. The clock on the wall seems to tick slower than a normal clock. The magazines are 3 years old. There's this low, fluorescent hum that gets inside your bones. It's a non-place, a space between spaces. You're not where you were, but you're not yet where you're going. And that's what this feels like. A life lived in the waiting room, waiting for the right job, waiting to save enough money, waiting for your real life to be called. And stuck in the waiting room. I remember this one Saturday morning with almost painful clarity. It was about 6 months ago. The sun was streaming through the window of my childhood bedroom, hitting the same spot on the floor it has for the last 20 years. I was 29. I was lying in bed, scrolling on my phone, just thumbing through images of other people's lives. An old friend from college had just posted a picture of the keys to their first house. Another had a picture of their toddler covered in spaghetti. And I was in the same bed, under the same band posters I put up when I was 16. I could hear the specific, familiar sound of my dad's favorite news channel humming from the television downstairs. And this thought, it just landed in my mind with this incredible weight. What am I doing here? It wasn't an angry thought. It was just hollow. And the question that followed it was the one that really scared me. Is this a personal failure? Am I lazy? Am I a bum for not being able to make it work? Or is the game itself different now? I put my phone down and just stared at the ceiling, and the only thing I felt was the profound, quiet weight of being in the exact same place I'd been trying to leave for a decade. So I started paying attention. And the more I looked at it, the more I wondered if something bigger is happening. Not just with me, with a lot of us. Let me share what I've been piecing together, and you can tell me if this resonates. At first, I thought it was just me, that maybe I didn't work hard enough, or I picked the wrong major, or I just wasn't good with money. It's so easy to internalize that story, isn't it? The culture is full of it. But then I started noticing patterns, seeing the same story play out with friends, with cousins, with people I followed online who were being honest for a second. And I could be wrong about this. I'm not a sociologist or an economist or anything. I'm just trying to make sense of my own life. Here's what I've pieced together from my own experience and from listening to others. First, there's the simple, brutal math. Maybe you've noticed this too. I went back and looked at the numbers. When my dad was 25 in the early 90s, he was making what would be about 45,000 a year today. He and my mom bought their first house for about 1,000. That's less than 3 times his annual salary. Me? I'm making a similar inflation-adjusted salary. But the average starter home in a 50-mile radius of where I live is now over 450,000. That's 10 times my salary. It's not even in the same universe of possibility. At first I thought it was just about houses, but then I looked at rent. The first apartment I ever dreamed of getting was a tiny one-bedroom. 5 years ago it was $100 a month. Today that same unit is $900. My salary has not gone up by 70%. From what I can tell, this isn't an accident. It's a fundamental decoupling of wages from the cost of basic survival. The goalposts haven't just been moved. They've been launched into a different solar system. And here's the part that I think people don't realize, especially the older generation who often repeat that phrase from the title. They see it as a failure of character, a lack of grit. What they don't see is that the financial equation they solved is a completely different equation than the one we're facing. It's like they were asked to solve 2, and were being asked to solve for x in a string of calculus. Of course you feel exhausted. Of course it feels impossible. You're trying to play a game where the basic rules of financial gravity have been reversed. It's not that you're failing the game. It's that the game itself is rigged against you. But that's not the only thing. Wait, let me back up. There's something else that connects to this. It's about why staying home feels so different now. I think there's been a quiet shift in what a family unit is for. In my parents' generation, the goal was to create independent, nuclear units as quickly as possible. You'd leave the nest to build your own. But now, from what I can tell, the family unit is becoming something else. It's becoming a base of operations for collective survival. It's not just about saving rent money. It's about pooling resources. My sister lives nearby, and she and her husband can both work because my mom provides free, loving childcare for my nephew. That's a direct economic subsidy worth thousands of dollars a month. I help my dad with tech stuff he can't figure out and do heavy lifting around the house that he can no longer manage. We're not just parents and a kid. We're an interdependent economic and social unit. The mechanism here is a response to a precarious world. When stable jobs with pensions disappear, when the social safety net is thin, people revert to the oldest safety net there is: family. The hidden cost of this, though, is that it directly conflicts with that old script of rugged individualism. You can feel incredibly grateful for the support and, in the very same moment, feel deeply ashamed that you need it. It creates this constant, confusing emotional whiplash. No wonder we're drained. We're trying to live out a new, collaborative reality while judging ourselves by the standards of an old, individualistic fantasy, and I'm still not totally sure how these connect, but the emotional part feels really important. And then there's the psychological weight of that old script. This is the one that gets me. This is the voice in your head that whispers the title of this video. If you don't move out when you're 18, you're a worthless bum. Maybe you've noticed this too, that even if you logically understand the economic realities, there's a part of your brain that doesn't care. It just sees the gap between your life and the expected life, and it fills that gap with shame. I see it on Instagram. It's not even the overt bragging. It's the subtle stuff. The casual shot of a beautifully decorated living room that is theirs. The picture of a dog in their backyard. Each image is a tiny paper cut to your sense of self-worth. It's a constant, ambient broadcast of a life you should be living. And here's what I think people don't realize about this feeling. It's not just disappointment. It's a form of grief. You're grieving a future you were promised, a future you were told was the reward for working hard. And when it doesn't materialize, the easiest person to blame is yourself. The emotional reality of this is that it's paralyzing. It's the very feeling of being stuck in the waiting room. The shame makes you want to hide, to become smaller, to not try. Because if you try and fail, it just confirms the voice in your head that says you're not good enough. Of course, you feel stuck. The shame is quicksand. The more you struggle against it, the deeper you sink. And if you're sitting here thinking, that's exactly what I've been feeling, but couldn't name, you're not alone. You're not weak. You're not failing. This isn't a you problem. This is the texture of the world for so many of us right now. You are a functional person responding rationally to a dysfunctional set of circumstances. So please, just for a second, let go of the idea that this is some personal flaw you need to fix. So here's where I landed, Zai. If the system, the economy, the cultural script is designed to drain us whether intentionally or not, what do we actually do? What's the alternative to just sitting in the waiting room forever? Well, I didn't want to accept being exhausted and ashamed forever. So I started trying things, small things, weird things. Some worked, some didn't, and I'm still figuring this out. But I want to share what's helped me, and maybe something here will help you too. I want to be clear, I'm not a guru. I'm not someone who figured it all out and is here to bestow wisdom from a mountaintop. I am still very much in the messy middle of all this. I'm just someone who was feeling drained and started trying different things to feel even 1% better. Some might work for you, some might not. They aren't grand solutions to fix the economy. They're just small ways I found to reclaim a sense of agency in my own life. But in case it helps, here's what's been working for me. About a year ago, I decided I had to change my relationship with the physical space I was in. I was living in my parents' house, but I was acting like a long-term guest. I realized I was waiting for my real home to start caring. So I started trying to shift from being a kid at home to an adult cohabitant. I sat down with my parents and had a deeply awkward conversation about contributing. Not just paying a token amount for rent, but taking ownership of certain household bills. The first few months were hard because the lines were so blurry. I tried to make a chore wheel like we were college roommates, and my dad just laughed and completely ignored it. I felt so stupid. I almost quit when my mom kept cleaning my bathroom for me, undoing my attempt to take ownership. It felt like I was playing house, inside my own house. But I kept at it, focusing on things I could control, like becoming the designated grocery shopper and cook 3 nights a week. The turning point was subtle. One evening, my dad referred to a new spice I'd bought as something had in or kitchen. It was a tiny shift in language, but it felt monumental. What I didn't expect was how this changed my own feeling about the space. It started to feel less like a symbol of my failure and more like our shared home, a place I was actively helping to run. Do I still sometimes feel like a teenager when my mom tells me to clean my room? Yes, sometimes. But it's not the default anymore. The next thing I tried came from a place of desperation. I felt like my life was completely stagnant, so I needed to create momentum, even if it was artificial. I called it my Forward Momentum Project. The rule was simple: find one thing, totally under my control, that I could get progressively better at. For me, it was woodworking. About 9 months ago, this specific thing happened. I spent an entire weekend doing nothing but watching TV and scrolling, and on Sunday night, I was filled with this self-loathing that was so intense it was almost nauseating. The next day, I went to the library, got a book on basic wood joints, and cleared a small corner of my dad's garage. So I started doing this specific action 1 hour every other day after work, no phone allowed, just me, some cheap pine, and a handsaw. The first few weeks were awful. My cuts were crooked. I got splinters. I felt like an idiot. But then on day, maybe 15, I made my first clean, tight-fitting dovetail joint. It was just a small block of wood, but I held it in my hand and felt this surge of competence. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in years. What I didn't expect was that the feeling wasn't about woodworking at all. It was about agency. In a life that felt totally out of my control, here was one small corner of the universe where my effort directly translated into tangible progress. It was my psychological escape hatch. It's not perfect, but having that one thing that is undeniably moving forward because of me has been a quiet anchor in the chaos. This next one might sound small, but its impact was huge. I had to consciously curate my timeline. About 7 months ago, I was having a particularly bad day, feeling very far behind in life. I opened Instagram, and the first 3 posts were a pregnancy announcement, a promotion, and a vacation to Italy. I felt this hot flush of shame and envy, and I realized I was willingly injecting myself with this poison every day. My turning point wasn't some grand digital detox. It was just me, on a Tuesday night, deciding to be a ruthless gardener of my social media feed. I muted people, not because I didn't like them, but because their life updates were a trigger for my own insecurity. Then I started actively seeking out and following people who were living different, valid lives. People in van conversions, people living in multi-generational homes in other cultures, artists who defined success on their own terms. What I didn't expect was how quickly my sense of what was normal began to change. My world got bigger. The old, narrow script of success started to look less like the only path and more like just one option among many. Do I still slip and get sucked into the comparison game? Of course, but now I have other stories, other images in my head to counteract it. It felt like I was at least changing the posters on the wall of the waiting room, and it made the whole space feel a little more like my own. But it's not a straight line, not at all. About 3 months ago, I thought I was really making progress. And then, during a Sunday dinner, my dad made an offhand comment. We were talking about a cousin who had just gotten a big promotion, and he said, "Must be nice to be fully on your own 2 feet." He didn't mean for it to be cruel, but it landed like a punch to the gut. That one comment sent me into a spiral. For the next week, I completely abandoned my solutions. I didn't go out to the garage. I ordered takeout instead of cooking. I spent hours doom scrolling, soaking in the lives of people who were their own 2 feet. I felt like such a failure. The mean things I said to myself were brutalacy. You're just pretending. You're a 29-year-old child. You're a leech. I thought, maybe I'm just not capable of this. Part of me wanted to give up completely. The argument felt like someone had locked the door to the waiting room and thrown away the key. Then something small happened. My room had gotten incredibly messy during my spiral, and on Friday, I just couldn't stand it anymore. I spent 20 minutes just making my bed and putting my clothes away. It wasn't an epiphany. It was just a small act of order in the chaos, and it broke the spell just a little. It reminded me I had some agency. I'm still not sure if I'm doing this right, and honestly, I'm still scared of how quickly I can be knocked off balance. But I'm trying anyway. This last one was the scariest, but maybe the most helpful. I decided to conduct what I called an exit interview with my parents' generation. I realized I was living under the weight of their expectations, but I never actually asked them about the reality of their own lives when they were my age. So I started doing this specific action. I asked my dad if I could talk to him, not as his son, but as a historian of his life. I sat down with a notepad and asked questions. What were you most afraid of when you were 29? How much did your first car cost as a percentage of your weekly paycheck? Were you ever scared you wouldn't be able to provide for your family? The implementation was key. I treated it like a formal interview, which created a different kind of space for the conversation. The turning point was when my dad admitted that he was terrified when they bought their first house, that he lay awake at night for months, convinced they'd lose it. What I didn't expect was the compassion it generated. It dismantled the myth of the effortlessly competent adult. It turned my parents from judges into fellow travelers who had just walked a slightly different, and in many ways easier, path. It didn't fix my financial problems, but it removed a huge layer of shame. It's not perfect, but those conversations have helped me see them, and myself, more clearly. So those are the things I've been trying. Some days are better than others, but there's something I didn't expect when I started doing this. Something about other people. About 2 months ago, my younger cousin, who's 23 and also living at home while he tries to get his career started, came over. He saw the corner of the garage I'd turned into my little workshop and asked what I was doing. I showed him the simple box I was making. He didn't say much. But a week later, he called me and said, I've been feeling like such a loser for being stuck here. But seeing you building stuff in the garage, it made me feel like it's okay, like you can still build a life, even from here. Oh, I was surprised because I hadn't even noticed he was paying that much attention. I was just trying to keep my own head above water. Then, a few weeks later, an old friend from college and I were on the phone. He was complaining about his rent and half-jokingly said he was thinking of moving back in with his parents for a year to save up. Then he got quiet and said, "How do you do it, man? How do you make it work without going crazy?" That's when it clicked. My private attempts to solve my own problem, to just feel a little less stuck, were unintentionally creating a space for other people to be more honest about their own struggles. It wasn't a strategy. It was just a side effect of trying. Remember at the start when I talked about that feeling of being stuck in the waiting room? Well, I'm not going to tell you it's completely gone now. That would be a lie. The room is still the room. The economic realities are still the same. But here's what's different. I don't see it as a waiting room anymore. I've started to see it as a workshop or a base camp, a place you prepare, you build your strength, you gather your resources before you start the climb. It's not a non-place, it's a foundational place. And that original heavy, stuck feeling, I don't think it was the feeling of being in the room. I think it was the feeling of being in the room alone and in shame. I think that feeling was actually profound loneliness, born from the belief that I was the only one. The solution wasn't to break down the door. It was to turn on a lamp and see who else was in the room with me. I don't have grand theories about where we're all headed. I'm not an optimist who thinks things will magically get better. I'm just one person trying to feel less drained and more human in a world that often feels designed to do the opposite. But I think if enough of us start choosing differently, choosing to be honest about our struggles, choosing to define success for ourselves, choosing to build a life of meaning wherever we happen to be standing, it has to matter. It ripples out. When one person shares their reality without shame, it gives others permission to do the same. It lowers the temperature for everyone. Maybe we're at a point where the old script has become so unattainable, so disconnected from reality that a lot of people are quietly, privately ready to let it go. I don't know if that's true, but I hope it is. Look, I'm still figuring this out. You're probably still figuring this out too. And that's okay. We don't need all the answers. We just need to start. or start again. You're not alone in feeling drained, but you're also not powerless. Anyway, that's what I've been noticing. Let me know if it resonates.